Brachim Habayim, welcome, friends of Israel, friends of the America-Israel Friendship League. My name is Wayne Firestone. I'm your host for this webinar series. We are indeed in a moment of crisis for our friends and loved ones in Israel. This has been over a week of collective trauma and indeed crisis that our loved ones are facing. Friends, whether you are with us here on the webinar series for the very first time out of concern and a desire for more information about what's happening, or if you've been with us for the past few years, we have overcome various challenges, various global challenges of conscience and of public health crisis, starting with COVID. You know that we have found there are moments where we need to come together, and this is one of those moments. Unprecedented, I think, is not an exaggeration on many levels. So we're here. I want to begin before introducing our very special guest today, who is not really a guest, but a host in his own regard. I want to ask everyone, I see people are starting to chime in from where they are around the world. We've had questions arrive even before we started the program today, but I do want to give people the opportunity to just share a word or two about how they're feeling at this moment. It's hard in moments like these to pretend that it's normal. This is not normal. And we do hope that this opportunity to come together, to learn more, to reflect together, to grieve together, to gain perspective is important. So please feel free as you're joining us today, whether it's for the first time or as you've been in the past, to share any reflections that you have about how you're feeling at this moment. And indeed, we hope to be able to help one another through this crisis in different ways. The American-Israel Friendship League, over 50 years of building relationships during good times and more difficult times. This is what we were built for, even if we could not even have imagined this day was possible this week and the weeks ahead. We will be here for you with extended coverage that we will update you on, not for the news, but for a moment of community building, which we know is necessary in moments like this, when Israel and friends of Israel around the world need an opportunity to come together, even at a time where flights are being canceled to Israel, reservists are coming back on their own to Israel. Many of us are watching, are not sleeping because of the fear and anxiety that exists. I can think of no other voice from Israel that has provided a calm and clear, rational perspective in moments of challenge and attack than Ambassador Danny Gillerman, who's joining us today. I wish I could tell you he was safe, but 5 minutes before we went on air, he had to leave this beautiful library background setting that makes things look calm behind him because we heard a siren. He heard a siren even before it was reported, and our staff and colleagues heard bombs going off in the Tel Aviv area, central Israel, as has been the case now for over a week. So, Ambassador Gilman, you have shared many opportunities to speak to the world at the United Nations when you were playing that role as a commercial ambassador, helping Startup Israel, Startup Nation, expand its possibilities. We even did one program, I recall, with leaders of the high-tech industry in Israel when there was another bomb alert, a missile attack in the central area of Tel Aviv. But indeed, this moment feels very unprecedented. So first of all, thank you for joining us on short notice. I want to give you the opportunity to just share some of your own reflections about where we are, and then we'll begin a conversation, a candid conversation about what's happening in the world today and how our friends and loved ones around the world can perhaps be helpful in this moment of utter existential challenge to the Jewish people and the state of Israel as we know it. So, Ambassador Gillerman, thanks for being with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Wayne, and thank everybody who has joined us at these very, very crucial and unprecedented moments for Israel. These, as Wayne pointed out, I was already sitting in this chair, waiting for the webinar to start when the sirens blared. We live in the north of Tel Aviv, and this is our second siren today. And I haven't even counted how many we've had in the last week. We're very obedient and disciplined, so we listen to the home front and we immediately shelter in our safe room. Our dog follows us there and actually seems to enjoy it, but we certainly don't. These are indeed very, very extremely unprecedented times for Israel. These are very tough times. We woke up just over a week ago to probably the most horrific pogrom and the most horrific attack on Israel, which we have witnessed at any time. And I include the Yom Kippur War, the 1973 war, certainly other wars, maybe even including the War of Independence, when we were only 600,000 people facing 7 Arab nations who were set on destroying us. Because what we witnessed on Saturday morning was the most vicious, inhumane attack that you could imagine. Hamas has proved in that attack that it is indeed the face of evil and cruelty, and in fact made ISIS look like Mother Teresa. You know, we as Jews and Israelis have not seen scenes of whole families slaughtered, of babies mutilated and beheaded, of old people dragged and killed, of women raped. This was on a level which I doubt we've seen anywhere in the world. And it was horrific. And indeed, the outcome of it is that Israel was, at least for the first day or two, in total shock, because not only the magnitude, but the cruelty and the evil were such that we couldn't even believe that people could do that. I mean, some people refer to Hamas as animals, and I hesitate to do that because that would be an offense to animals. They're wild beasts. They are people who truly not only do not value human life, but are set on killing, raping, beheading, and destroying innocent people. This is, I think, a very, very important point, because I see, even in the United States today, in universities and campuses, I see people demonstrating for the Palestinians. If they demonstrate for the Palestinian people, believe me, I'm with them. I pity the Palestinian people. I have a lot of sympathy for them. I think most of them just want to live in peace and raise their children and live in a better world. But Hamas, the terror organization, which has actually taken 2 million Palestinians hostage and turned Gaza into one of the world's largest prison, is not the Palestinian people. Hamas is intent on destroying and killing innocent people. You know, there's one big difference between Israel, there's a lot of differences between Israel and Hamas, but one of the main ones is that Israel uses its IDF, the Israel Defense Force, its army, to protect civilians. Hamas uses civilians to protect itself. They don't care about civilian lives. They don't care about civilian deaths. In fact, for them, the more civilians killed, the better, because it aids them in their propaganda war. They use civilians as human shields. They hide their rockets and their missiles in kitchens and bathrooms and hospitals. And they are intent on destroying and killing as many Jews and Israelis as they can, and they've proved it in that attack last Saturday. Now, these indeed are horrible, difficult, very, very tough days for Israel. But I want to actually start with a note of optimism, if at all possible, during these dark days, and say that we are strong, we are resilient, we have united, and we will overcome this, we shall prevail, and we will win. We will win not only because we are better and we are stronger and we are just and we are moral and we are right. We will win because we simply don't have another option. You know, President Biden, in his truly remarkable speech, quoted Golda Meir, whom he met 50 years ago, who said to him that we have a secret weapon. And that secret weapon is that we have nowhere else to go. So we will fight, we will pay Hamas back and punish it in the strongest possible way for what it did, until there isn't a single Hamas member or soldier or leader alive in Gaza. That's the only way. We cannot allow one of them even to remain standing, because they have proved to be not only a cruel and evil, but a danger to the region and a danger to the Palestinian people as well. And when I say danger to the region, I just want to point out one thing, and that is that at the end of the day, Hamas is really a proxy of Iran. Both Hamas and Hezbollah are proxies of Iran. They are the bloody tentacles on the twisted brains in Tehran who are intent on terrorizing the world. Iran is the world's major perpetrator, financer, and engineer of terror. And they are not interested in a stable world or in a stable Middle East, certainly not in a peaceful one. And I have no doubt that one of the reasons that Hamas did that was because Iran wanted to disrupt what looked like a very promising agreement between the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, which would have brought peace to the region. And Hamas decided that this is not in their interest, and therefore instructed their proxies to go on this mad rampage. So Iran will pay a price as well, but I assure all our friends who have gathered here and Jews around the world, Israel is strong, Israel is now united, and we will overcome this, prevail, and win.
You covered so much ground richly to provide context for where we're at the moment. And then I noted that you said the first couple of days, Israelis were very transfixed, understandably, to some of the images, the trauma, the reality of what had occurred. Some of that is only now being fully, I think, understood or appreciated outside of Israel. Certainly, this notion that there needed to be a response. Do you feel that the response that's being mounted now is calculated to the success of what needs to be done, the elimination of Hamas, as you said earlier? Is that something that you can now feel that we're past a stage of certain revenge or reaction to the initial incursion, but now that there's a greater sense of the strategic importance of what the military needs to do?
Definitely, Wayne. We've had several, too many actually, rounds of conflict and of warfare with Hamas. And they all ended one way or another with mediation from Qatar and Egypt. And they only led to Hamas getting bigger and stronger and better equipped and developing capabilities which they actually demonstrated in the most cruel and horrible way. Now, people who do what Hamas did on Saturday morning, including going from house to house, door to door, and killing and murdering and mutilating and beheading and raping women and children, and going to a nature party where people, young people just came to have fun and to dance and to listen to music, and killing 260 people in that party, again, indiscriminately and viciously. These things cry for more than just, this is not about vengeance and revenge. I mean, obviously vengeance and revenge are justified in this, but this has proved to us that we can no longer afford, and the people who live in the south of Israel, and the kibbutzim and the moshavim who've lived there for over 70 years, just, you know, tending to their gardens and to the agriculture and to their children, these people can no longer have this horrible, horrific, cruel organization as neighbors. And therefore, when we go for the mission, which I hope will start very, very soon, we're going with one aim. And that was also the reason that a national unity, it was the condition for a national unity government, that all members will commit to eliminating, demolishing, destroying Hamas until not a single member or leader is alive in Gaza. By doing that, we will not only punish them, but we will also free the people of Gaza from the stranglehold of that vicious, vicious regime. So the answer is yes, we are ready, and we're going to go in and finish the job.
Let me move to the diplomatic front. You made a reference to this anecdote of President Biden talking about meeting with Golda Meir. Could you describe, as a seasoned diplomat, having met many presidents, talked with many world leaders, et cetera, what to you did it mean to have President Biden speak as directly he did, not to a Jewish audience and not to a visiting delegation in a closed room, but to send out the kind of message that he did, and then obviously to follow that up with the two aircraft carriers that are meant to show not merely symbolic support, but actual camaraderie at this moment?
I must tell you that when I watched President Biden with the Vice President and the Secretary of State next to him, I, at a certain point, had tears in my eyes, and I would have been very, very proud to be an American at that moment, because the President of the United States has spoken words which no American president has said before. We've had presidents, I think most American presidents were sympathetic to Israel and friendly to Israel. From Harry Truman, who recognized Israel 11 minutes after it was established, throughout all the presidents. But I think, and I really felt that President Biden's speech was the most pro-Israeli speech that any American president has ever given. And I also felt that it came from the heart. It really came from the heart. Now, Joe Biden has been a friend of Israel for 50 years. As you just mentioned, met Golda Meir as a young senator and has been a friend. But this was a show of solidarity, of commitment, of true friendship, which to me was unprecedented. And we truly are very, very grateful. We're very grateful to the president. We're very grateful to the American people for their support. It truly means a lot to us. It's a source of solace and of courage. And we're also very grateful, not just for the words, but for the deeds. Because as you said, sending 2 aircraft carriers, including the Gerald Ford, into the shores of Israel and actually nearer the shores of Lebanon to make it clear to Hezbollah, which is another and even bigger and more dangerous terror organization in the north, that, as he said very clearly and repeatedly, don't. And I hope they get the message. But this was a moment to us, of great pride and great gratitude for this amazing act of friendship and of partnership. And truly, God bless America.
There's a report that I saw in the press earlier today about Russia calling for a UN Security Council session on Monday to vote on the Israel-Gaza situation. What do you think their motivation at this point may be, and is that likely to happen as quickly as next week?
Well, their motivation is very clear, because they are very supportive of Syria. They want to be in control or have significant influence in the Middle East. They don't like the fact that America is back, because for a while, we must admit that America was absent from the Middle East and has actually created a space for Russia to step in. But, first of all, I think, and I'm saying this sarcastically, Vladimir Putin should be very grateful to Israel, because it has taken the war, his incredibly stupid and foolish decision to go into war in Ukraine, off the front pages. I mean, have you heard anybody mention Ukraine in the last week? No, it's all about Israel and Gaza. So in a way, Putin should be happy about it. But by going to the Security Council, he's just trying to make a point which is totally insignificant. I mean, I've served at the UN for 6 years. I've appeared in the Security Council hundreds of times. It's totally useless. It's just 15 ambassadors reading statements they receive from their capitals. Many of them don't even know what they're talking about, and they have never been to the areas they're talking about. But at the end of the day, we have the United States there with a veto right. So whatever they try to do will be vetoed anyway. So it will just be a stage which I'm very surprised the Russians are taking, because if I were them, I would hide rather than try and step up on the stage. But I have no expectations that this will have any. I was also quite disappointed by the Secretary General of the UN, of Guterres, who I gave more credit to, and I heard him speak, and the main thing he spoke about was the rules of war and sympathy for the Palestinians, and I would expect from someone in that position, especially after realizing what really happened, to show more support for Israel and less sympathy for Hamas.
Well, we certainly have lots of questions that are already coming in, and I think that last point that you made is something I'm seeing a lot of people ask about. In the old days, we called it Hasbara. How do we explain a situation like Gaza? And by the way, I thought your imagery and your metaphor of thinking about the Palestinian people as actually kidnappees, that they have been held hostage to a hostile leadership, I think is a very rich metaphor, and has a way of explaining that distinction that you made up front between the Palestinian people and their civilian population on the one hand, and this group that is agreed by, I don't know if it's the majority of countries, but certainly many countries as a terrorist group, defined as such. I guess the question that we received, to put it more specifically, is how is it possible in a time of short media bites and social media images, how do we make that history of the fact that Israel actually left Gaza, left the Palestinian people the opportunity to elect leadership, and this is what the result is, something that any nation certainly would consider unacceptable on their border. But how do we tell that story, or sort of make that more shifting the debate from Israel being aggressor against civilian population to a civilian population is being held hostage by lunatics who are homicidal and killing their own people through human shields?
Well, you made a point which is very, very important and which I'm not sure everybody is aware of. I was actually at the UN when Israel left Gaza. The prime minister who took that historic decision was Arik Sharon, who himself was an army general and has fought in Gaza. And he decided that the right thing was to, we called it at the time, disengagement, but to leave Gaza altogether. We've left every single inch of Gaza. There isn't and there wasn't a single Israeli, either civilian or military, in Gaza when we left. And the Palestinians then had a choice to turn Gaza into Singapore of the Middle East with our help and with international aid, or to turn it into a terror base and a launching pad for missiles against Israel. Now, at first, the PLO controlled Gaza, and we had hopes that it may go the Singapore way. But very quickly, Hamas overthrew the PLO. And when I say overthrew, they literally overthrew. They threw leaders of the PLO and PLO members from the 14th floor of buildings and crushed their skulls. They were as vicious towards their own people, maybe not as, but nearly as vicious towards their own people as they were towards us, and have taken over Gaza and have indeed turned it into the world's largest prison. And this is something the world has to understand. Now, you also, when you talk about the Palestinians, you really have two entities. You have Gaza and you have the West Bank. Now, I'm not saying that life on the West Bank is paradise. And I'm not saying that it's, everything the Palestinians want or deserve. But you go to cities today like Nablus and Ramallah and others, and you see thriving cities, you see a thriving high-tech industry, you see young people going to university and studying. Now, we still have pockets of resistance and pockets of terror in Gaza, in the West Bank. But the standard of living in the West Bank, the standard of education, the way of life there is totally, totally different to the one in Gaza. And I was always hoping that the people in Gaza will look at their cousins, their brothers in the West Bank and say to themselves, we want that. We don't want Israeli occupation. We will continue to oppose it and to fight against it. But at the same time, we want a better standard of living. We want to raise our children. We want them to go to good schools and get good medical attention. Hamas did not allow that to happen. And I think that the West Bank, with all the difficulties, and I say again, I don't think the situation there is perfect. And I think we should actually try to reach an agreement with the Palestinians and hopefully at the end of the day, maybe even reach that two-state solution, which I think at the end is the answer. I know many people may disagree, and especially after yesterday or after last week. But I think that distinction is very, 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 very important. And the fact that we've left Gaza nearly 20 years ago, and they could have turned it into a better place and instead turned it into a concentration camp, is a horrible, horrible reality.
Well, I think that's another point that people need to be aware of. All those people who want a two-state solution, Hamas does not want a two-state solution, and has made that very clear with this action. So people who desire an end result that is in that camp really needs to understand that Hamas has both said and taken action now to prevent that from happening. And arguably, there's a lot of speculation on the timing because of the regional efforts that seem to be happening with some of the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia in particular, that they wanted to make sure that those efforts were halted. So at the moment, peace feels very far off because we're in the middle of a war, but nonetheless, on the understanding the distinction between a Palestinian future that could be healthy, even if it's less than Singapore, and your analogy, are certainly not going to get that from anything they've seen from Hamas over 2 decades and arguably longer. But certainly when they had the opportunity to prove what their leadership looked like, what their intentions are for living next door to Israel.
Yes, definitely. I think Hamas, first of all, Hamas commitment, declared official statement, is that they are there in order to destroy the state of Israel. There's no peace with Hamas. There is no settlement with Hamas. And by doing what they did last Saturday, they've also sent a message that they will not stop at anything until they have killed and mutilated, every Israeli. So we obviously are not going to let that happen. I want to make a point which I think some people miss, but allowing Hamas to continue to exist is in a way committing suicide, because what we're witnessing today in Israel is really only the trailer. It's a preview, soon to be seen in a theater near you. If you allow an organization like that to continue to be an entity and even get the support of some countries in the world, like Russia and Iran, you are inviting terror to your doorstep. And these are people who will, who have no regard, as I said before, for human life. When we go into Gaza, and we will, there will be some civilian casualties, but there will be, after we very, very carefully try to avoid civilian casualties. And that, again, is the big difference between us and them. For us, every dead Palestinian child is a mistake and a tragedy. For them, every dead Israeli child is a success and a cause for celebration. People have to understand who we are up against, what we're up against, and why only totally destroying and demolishing them will actually be the solution to this very, very painful situation.
You referred earlier to the historic reaction from the United States president and government. You referred to the expected and disappointing sort of initial steps from the United Nations. Have there been other reactions externally that have surprised you? L'tov or l'ra? Have there been things, I know we're early in this, understandably, but have you seen or heard reactions that suggest that this is just another event in the long Arab-Israel conflict, and with Iran now lurking as behind all of this? Are we just in another chapter, or have you seen any movement, either from governments or from other actors on the international stage, including the media, I suppose, that suggests there might be an understanding, there might be something different that this incident has triggered.
Yes, I do. I do think that this incident has triggered something which is very special and very different, in that we are today truly enjoying the support of most democracies in the world. I have spoken before about President Biden and the American support, which we never take for granted, but which is, again, totally, the commitment this time is just above and beyond what we've known. But we've also had that support from Europe, including the European Commission, which is not usually very friendly towards Israel. Certainly countries like Britain and France, we just had the British Secretary of State visiting us, Netherlands, and many, many European countries. So far, the only countries that have sort of come out in support of Hamas or opposition to Israel were indeed Russia, Iran, that evil club. Even in the Arab world, we've seen Jordan, we've seen Egypt. They're in a very tough situation, but we have truly, I think at the end of the day, received understanding, at least, from them. So, but again, Wayne, let me be very clear about that. This could change in a minute. Once we enter Gaza, and the pictures of the destruction and the pain and the victims will be seen around the world, the sentiment will change. It's what I used to call the CNN effect. You can have the sympathy of the world, and you can be the good guy, and their propaganda machine is very, very effective. Much of it is based on lies. Fake news is rampant in Hamas and its supporters. They show things which did not even happen now. They stage things, but at the end of the day, people see it, and the sentiment may change. But we truly believe that what has happened on Saturday morning, just over a week ago, justifies going in and finishing the job, trying as hard as we can to do it by international law and by having as little collateral damage as possible, hurting as few civilians as possible. We've actually, the Israeli army was described by American and British generals as the most moral army in the world. We're the only army who planes who were about to bomb saw a kid or a child and stop their mission. Not now, but not even now, but before. We are the only army that as we call it, knocks on the door and tells people to go away before we bomb. And we've actually now told people to leave, to evacuate, because we're going to bomb. And Hamas is trying to stop these people from evacuating because, for them, every civilian casualty is another medal, which is horrendous, but very true.
We have a number of questions about Egypt, and certainly we know United States Secretary Blinken has been in the region, appears to be doing some shuttle diplomacy there. Do you, at the moment, some of that relates to a passageway, at least we expect for Americans that has not been readily accessible. Perhaps there are other issues that they could be helpful on. Do you see any prospects of some help from the Southern Front?
I don't know about help. Obviously, Egypt is basically still the leader of the Arab world. I remember when Sadat came to Israel, He said, Egypt is the leader of the Arab world. War and peace are made in Egypt. And I imagine, I know that President Assisi is in a very tough situation. But the Egyptians have tried before to be very helpful as mediators with Hamas, including trying to bring about some hostage exchange. This is another point we did not discuss, but in addition to all the killings and the horrible acts they did, Hamas has today nearly 150 Israelis held hostage, some of them American, some of them British and European. God knows where they are, God knows how they are. So Egypt is trying to mediate. Qatar, which always likes to be in the game, is also trying to mediate. But I think that one of the things that Israel has made clear this time, that this is not a time for mediation. This is not a time for compromise. This is not a time for a settlement. This is time to wipe out Hamas. And I'll tell you something, they may not admit it, but I think that the president of Egypt, the king of Jordan, will be very, very happy if we do that. They have their own problems with Muslim extremists. We've seen what happened in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood. We know what is happening with the Palestinians in Jordan. And I can tell you that, you know, for example, during the Lebanon War, the Second Lebanon War, when I was at the UN, I cannot even begin to tell you how many Arab ambassadors came to me, obviously personally and not publicly, and said to me, finish the job, kill those bastards. Ambassadors of major Arab countries who understood what we're up against and understood that these people at the end of the day will try and destroy them as well. So I have a lot of respect for Egypt's willingness to be a mediator, but this is no time for mediation and this is no time for a compromise. This is time to finish the job.
I want to shift for a moment from the international and regional stage to the home front. I saw a report in the Israeli press that said in the past week since the conflict began, 165,000 Israelis returned from overseas to come into a war zone. Does that surprise you at all?
No, it doesn't surprise me. It makes me very proud, but it doesn't surprise me. Israel has always proven to be at its strongest and its togetherness when under threat. Now, as you know, Wayne, until literally 2 weeks ago, we had demonstrations every Saturday where hundreds of thousands of Israelis for nearly 40 weeks demonstrated against what we call the judicial overhaul and what the government called the judicial reform. Among them, pilots and members of the elite units of the Israeli army. You know, with the minute the war started, or the minute this happened, all of them, the attendance or the call-up response was at 120%. There are actually too many people turning up, including those pilots and including those members of the elite units, and including thousands of Israelis, as you said, who swarmed to the airports, who were begging for a seat on the plane. And it was very difficult to get a seat on the plane, but we've also seen some amazing scenes of Americans who came, probably wealthy Americans, who came there and actually paid for them to get on the plane. Some of them even gave their own private planes or chartered a private plane. And the response by Israelis to come here and to take part in this effort to make Israel safe again is really unprecedented. It's one of the most impressive shows of patriotism which I think I've ever seen, and which any country I think has ever seen.
I too am sort of in awe of that aspect of Israeli society, which you refer to, both the ability to come together during difficult circumstances and this sort of volunteer ethos, which kicks in difficult moments. Can you just describe that in a little more detail, like what you're seeing and how that's manifesting itself in terms of Israelis helping one another in uniform, out of uniform, with all the disruptions that have taken place?
Yes, it's actually, if there is a ray of light in these dark times, it's the spirit of volunteering, which is truly unbelievable. Israelis have come together to help and to provide things which are needed either by the soldiers or by the residents of the south, many of whom have been displaced and are now living elsewhere. People have opened their homes. People have formed kitchens in order to cook meals for these people. People have made donations, whether it's by money or, my son, for example, who was in an elite fighting unit of the Israeli army, and but is now 50, so he's they didn't call him up, but he has joined a group called Brothers and Sisters for Arms, which really have become the pivot and the leader of all this relief effort, and they're doing unbelievable things. And he's in his car, he goes from the north to the south, bringing meals and clothes and equipment, and he's just one of thousands. I mean, the spirit of volunteering which has developed here is truly unbelievable. We even get some videos and some jokes from soldiers in the front to say, please help us, stop all these deliveries. We can't even find our things with all the everything that you've showered us with. So this in a way brings a smile to our faces, and there is a real spirit of volunteering, of solidarity, and happily, if you can be happy at these somber times, it has also brought about the formation of a national unity government, actually an emergency cabinet. And this is something which I welcome very, very much. I think that the people who've joined the cabinet, Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, are two very experienced generals, former chiefs of staff of the Israeli army, who bring their experience and their wisdom, together with Gideon Saar, who was a minister of justice and a very experienced politician. And I think that they are bringing to this government abilities, experience, wisdom, level-headedness, which are very, very necessary at that time, and also signaling that at times of crisis, however much criticism we may have about the government, we are all together in order to win this thing, and we will.
You touched earlier on the reality of there being hostages during the ongoing war. We've been seeing such tragic stories on the individual level following funerals and identification of civilians that were killed. And obviously, on top of that, the uncertainty of the safety and well-being of those that are presumed to be hostages at the moment. Can you describe at all? I've seen some of the interviews and signs being held up in protests, street protests, just reminding people, bring our children home, and exchange for our kidnappees, things like that. Can you describe how that is affecting the Israeli psyche? It's challenging to see. It's also challenging to look away from it, I guess, at the moment as well.
Well, this is at the moment, I think, one of the most difficult elements of this conflict, because we do have, we're not sure how many, but probably anywhere between 130 and 160 people held hostage. Among them a 9-month-old baby, and little children and women and elderly people who need their medication, which they don't have. This is a very dire situation. We don't know where they are, or at least I don't know where they are. Hopefully, maybe our intelligence does know. We're bombing Gaza in a very extensive way, and they could be hurt. But as I said before, I think, while everybody wants to see them home as safely and as quickly as possible, we know who we're up against. This is a very, very cruel enemy. They will do everything to exploit and to use these hostages, and we will probably see some horrible things. The president quoted Golda Meir. There's another quote by her, which I think is very, very poignant. Golda Meir said that there will not be peace until the Arabs learn to love their children more than they hate us. And I think that in the case of Hamas, the hatred and the inhumanity is such that I'm very worried about the hostages. I wish we could free them as we did the hostages in Entebbe, which was much further away than Gaza. But these are different times and different circumstances. But I'm sure that the people in charge are giving a lot of thought to how to get them back. I remind you that we had, at one time, we had one hostage, one single soldier called Gilad Shalit, and it took us 5 years to get him back. In exchange, we freed over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, some of whom are today, including Mohammed Senior, who are leaders of Hamas. So we freed them in order for them to come and kill us again. So this is a very, very difficult situation. I know that the US is trying to help as well, because they unfortunately also have some experience with hostages, and some of the teams are in touch with the Israelis and maybe even here. I hope this will be, I hope we'll have them back quickly and safely, but this indeed is a very, very worrying aspect of this horrible conflict.
Ambassador Gillerman, we're coming up on the end of our hour together, but I'm still very taken by your description earlier of the reality that many of us have been watching, and many of our Israeli friends and colleagues who've been participating in various forms of public protest in Israel, and how very quickly that has shifted to a mood of unity and operational necessity for national survival. It's clearly a strength that perhaps only people that really know Israel could have anticipated. And I'm wondering how, I just want to give you the last word, even though you've given us some glimmers of hope in very, very dark days that you're living now, and that we started this episode with you going to your bomb shelter. How does that aspect of Israeli resilience, how does it translate into the hard days that are ahead of Israel and Israel's friends around the world?
Well, I think that Israel's resilience, and indeed, we are very resilient, and we have overcome very difficult times in the past. And unfortunately, we are seasoned in these things, although something like what happened last Saturday was beyond even our biggest nightmares. But first of all, I may be the wrong person to ask because I'm an incurable optimist. I spent hundreds of hours with Shimon Peres, who used to say that optimists and pessimists end the same way, so isn't it better to live as an optimist? And I try to practice that. These are very difficult times for optimists, because what you see can bring about horrible pessimism, but we cannot afford it. We cannot afford to be pessimistic. We cannot afford to be weak. We cannot afford to hesitate. And therefore, I believe that, first of all, the scenes we are seeing today, which I described, of the Israeli people coming together and volunteering and donating and volunteering also for military duty, including, we've had generals who've left the army 20 or 10 years ago and who are in their 60s, who put on a uniform and took their weapon and went out and saved people in those kibbutzim and that. We see every day, and we hear every day of new stories of bravery in the face of that evil. So I think that at the end of the day, Israel will prove yet again, and it's sad that we have to prove it time and time again, that its resilience, its strength, its belief, its patriotism, and its optimism will prevail over the hatred and the darkness and the evil which we are facing.
Amen to that. Ambassador Gillerman, as a public diplomat and as a private citizen, we thank you for letting us into your home, and at one moment I thought it was going to be into your bomb shelter as well. I was concerned about whether Zoom was going to work there, but as always, for me, it's a privilege to just be able to call you Danny as the chair of our America-Israel Friendship League, because it's moments like this where friendships are both tested and formed. And today we had on our call hundreds, and we'll have thousands of people who are aware of our work of bringing together our people during difficult moments, but will also understand the long ties and the common values that are the basis for this friendship, which indeed is something to celebrate.
Well, thank you, Wayne. Thank you very much for these words. Thank you for having this webinar. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank also, Ruby Shamir and Daniela in Israel, obviously Eric and Jonathan and the whole team in New York. They are the ones who are carrying this burden with me and being extremely helpful. And we're also involved in making this webinar hopefully a success. So we have a great team. And, the word friendship, which is part of our organization's name, has been tested yet again and come out winning. And we're very grateful for your friendship and for old friends that have joined us. And together, I promise you, we shall overcome and we shall win.
Friends, that wraps our episode with those important words and thoughts to help us get through this day-to-day experience. That's where we're at the moment. That's where the American Israel Friendship League is we will continue to bring you new and fresh programs and insights throughout the war crisis. So keep your eyes in your inbox. Make sure you're sharing these free sessions that we provide afterwards, copies and videos with people who you think can learn and gain perspective from them. We will continue to do this as we have in the past. With new programming. So we promise you that we will continue to support you, to support our friends and family and loved ones in Israel, even during these very difficult times. Thank you for being with us. Our thoughts and prayers are with all of our Israeli mishpacha, our Israeli family and friends who are in harm's way as we speak. And we will continue to provide for you new ways in which you can be supportive from them. Everyone have a safe week.